Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today, May 17th of 2022. It is a Tuesday. And I want to talk to you about something that's important, an issue that affects us all. We want to talk about the safety of the public, the safety for you and for me, and the actions we take to try and make ourselves safe, and those in our government that are trying to make us less safe. That those who are using fear to take away our ability to protect ourselves. It's a very big issue, and it's an issue that's very popular right now because, of course, of the most recent mass shooting in Buffalo, New York. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, before we start, we do want to mention that if this is the first time that you are seeing our channel, we welcome you and we thank you for being part of our audience. We do long-form political commentary, and every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out on social media to hear you speak, your chat, your text, your phone calls from anywhere in the world to tell us what you think about the issues that are affecting you, because we believe in your right to the First Amendment. We believe that regardless of whether your government agrees, whether or not the internet overlords agree, we believe you have the right to free speech, even if you're not an American citizen. And we hope you will exercise that every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with us, talking about the issues that matter to us all. We hope to see you this Sunday. You may notice that I'm wearing something today, not my usual jacket or suit, but you're noticing I have something on. That's this. This is a bulletproof vest, otherwise known as body armor, and it's a big subject right now. And from time to time, as the public is afraid and made to worry about issues of crime, people look into this. Now, some people think it's a great idea to have body armor. Some people, especially elected politicians in New York State, think it's a terrible idea. Let's try and go over exactly why that's the case. Now, we mentioned this before. This is not a new subject for us. In fact, you may recall that yesterday, 22 hours ago, we mentioned Bill A352. This is important because in January of 2021, this very same subject came up. And in fact, we've seen that this is something that's been worked on since 2019, that there are members of New York State's legislature, a Democrat-controlled legislature and governor that have been pushing to deny the American people the ability to wear this bulletproof vest. Why? Because, as you can see, there are no offensive capabilities on this bulletproof vest. It's a defensive only. It's meant for self-protection. It cannot harm others. That is the definition of it. And we said this on many mediums. We reached out to many people to try and let you know that this was going to happen. And we won't go through all of it, but we had the same message. This isn't a new thing. The fear may be new to you, or it may be recurring, but the idea that you don't deserve to be able to protect yourself or your family by wearing something that will help protect you, that's not a new idea. It's an idea that's become very popular. And just as we promised 22 hours ago, we see that news is coming out at this time telling the public that body armor is a bad idea. Body armor is something that racists use, which is a lie. But we see that. This is Channel 6 News out of Albany, CBS affiliate, and they say body armor accessibility raises concern. There's a concern for being able to have body armor to protect yourself, a defensive action, a passive defensive action. And they say that, well, there is a Sheriff Apple who says he doesn't believe it's good for the public to have tactical gear, for the public to have body armor, because sometimes criminals will use body armor to help them. Now, understand, he's upset that criminals will get access to body armor, which makes it difficult for his job. So therefore, civilians, law-abiding citizens, need to be denied the right to be able to protect themselves as well. That's the argument that he has made, as reported by CBS. Now, there is also Brad Pendle, the co-founder of 221B Tactical, a store in New York City, and he says he's seen a tremendous increase in sales of body armor, and he credits the change in the country's mood over the past few years. And he says that because customers come in very fearful for their physical safety because perpetrators get lenient punishment, if at all. So there's one side, law enforcement, that say, well, criminals may get access to this body armor, even though it's illegal for anyone with a felony to have it. But because civilians have it, well, criminals may get it. Legal, law-abiding citizens may get it. So therefore, criminals may get it. And therefore, we have to stop everyone from having body armor. But yet people are afraid. Why are they afraid? Why would people even consider getting body armor? Well, before I get to my personal reason, one of the questions that was asked is, well, people don't think criminals are being charged harshly. Now, you could think of Ketanji Brown Jackson and her treatment of pedophiles, and we saw that in the Supreme Court discussions for her nomination earlier this year, where she was very lenient, and many, or at least some, of those offenders continued to offend because of the light sentencing that she provided. But there's also the fact that people are seeing things like this. And this is from, just look up, BLM arrest charges dropped in Google. And look at what the search engine will find you. From The Guardian, April 17th of 2021, most charges against George Floyd protesters dropped. Well, you say, well, those are protesters, they're innocent, no problem. Why charges against protesters are being dismissed in the New York Times, November 2020. Hundreds of BLM rioters, looters, and vandals. Let's be more specific. We're not just talking about the BLM protests. We're also talking about the protests where arson was committed in many cities across the United States, where 36 people died, where billions of dollars of damage per city was done. Yeah, hundreds of looters, rioters, and vandals were never charged. Again, that's from The Sun, New York Post. The NBC News, charges dropped against hundreds of alleged looters. Cities dropped most charges against BLM protesters from truth.org. Maricopa County Attorney to drop remaining charges against the BLM protesters who committed looting and rioting, in some cases arson and murder. Why would people think that criminals are being let off easy? Who could possibly imagine why? Let's see. Crime, as we've defunded the police, the 22 cities that defunded the police, well, we've seen in 2021 and continuing in 2022, crime is going up through the roof. It's continuing to go higher. In fact, let's take a look at what New York State has to say about this. New York State, in providing the Gun-Involved Violence Elimination Report, the GIVE. I mention it often on this program when talking about the Second Amendment. This is New York State's, their own report from the top 17 cities in New York State. And what they are saying is that as of March 31st, 2022, there is and you'll see at the top of the screen, a 38% increase in shooting incidents involving injury. You'll also see that there is a 58.1% increase in individuals killed by gun violence, by criminals using firearms illegally. You'll also see that over the last 5 years, the 5-year change is there is a 45% increase in individuals injured because of shootings, a 54% increase in the number of individuals killed with gun violence. This is after, in 2013, the New York SAFE Act was enacted. That's after 2018, when we see that the red flag laws were enacted. That's after 2022, where we see that ghost gun bans were put in place. We've got lots of gun control. We have thousands of laws in New York State alone 22,000 gun control laws across the United States. And what we're seeing here in New York is seen in Philadelphia, California, it's seen in Washington, it's seen everywhere across this country. I won't even talk about Chicago or Illinois or Detroit or Baltimore. These numbers have been increasing. And while it's increasing, you have to ask the question, why would the average citizen, reading story after story down in Florida, Parkland, Florida, that school shooting, the Sandy Hook shooting, the San Bernardino shooting, the Orlando, Florida nightclub shooting. How many do we have to go through? The Boulder, Colorado grocery store shooting last year. How many of these events do we need to go over? Yes, the public has a fear for themselves and their families, their children. And yes, people are buying body armor to protect themselves because of that. Doesn't seem to be that strange. Now, you may ask, well, Mike, why do you have body armor? Is it because you're a racist? Because remember, the idea right now is, well, a racist used body armor in Buffalo, so racists only have body armor. Well, that's not true. And why do I have it? Because I'm a member of the press, and I go out to various events. I cover live protests very often. And there are organizations like the Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, where some of their members have, in writing and verbally, said that they want to attack me. They have threatened me with physical violence and intimidation. They've tried. And they've made these threats over years. So when I go out to cover these events, yeah, sometimes I have body armor because I don't trust them. I have no reason to trust them. Not because of their history, nor what we see across this nation and the growing violence. So yeah, like many members of the press, I wear body armor. But like many citizens, I wear body armor because the violence is increasing. And every promise that we have heard that just one more law, just one more to restrict the Second Amendment, and you'll be safe. And you're going to be okay. And law enforcement will protect you. Meanwhile, we see violent crime increasing. We're seeing criminals being released due to bail reform. These things are happening and people are concerned. So that answers the question, well, it should only be restricted to law enforcement and the military and not the public. Why shouldn't the public be able to defend themselves? They have a legitimate fear. But let's go further because that's not the only argument that's being made. There's also Rolling Stone magazine. They came out with their article today. This is their article, Body Armor Helped the Buffalo Shooter Carry Out His Rampage. This could have banned it. Again, they're saying Bill A352, which we've spoken about in January of 2021. They're saying, no, this would have stopped it. If he didn't have it, it would be okay. Because he planned and he bought the body armor knowing it would save his life. Okay, so let's think about that. Who was the shooter afraid of? According to Rolling Stone in their own article, he bought the body armor, a bulletproof vest, to protect himself from the police and conceal carry citizens. A good guy with a gun. See, his three big concerns, armed security, police officers responding, and any American citizen who is exercising their Second Amendment right to carry a firearm, which is highly subdued in New York State because of all the regulations and their attempt to silence the Second Amendment. But he found that that was one of his biggest concerns because there could be an American citizen who's gone through the cost, who's gone through the paperwork, the regulations, and was given a firearm permit, a concealed carry permit in New York State. There aren't a lot of people. It's highly restricted, but they do exist, and he was afraid that one of them might be there, as well as the criminal element. He was afraid of them as well. So he was just as afraid of law-abiding citizens and even non-lawful citizens as he was law enforcement. And that's why he wanted bulletproof vests. Well, that's the exact same reason why citizens want the bulletproof vest, because they don't trust criminals. So he's taking the same precaution that anyone would. So the question comes, and we have to ask of Rolling Stone and others who are saying this, saying that you shouldn't have a bulletproof vest. We have to ask you, okay, so because a deranged, psychotic, vile criminal has made a use of something that you and I use, does that mean that none of us should have it? Listen, vile and crazed criminals use bricks. And we've seen the reports, stories of homeless people in the New York City subway hitting people with bricks. Should we remove all bricks? Are bricks illegal? There are about 4 times as many people every single year are killed with a knife instead of a firearm. Now, that's a statistic that comes from the FBI itself. That is a statistic that has been true for at least the 15 years that I've been looking into the data and reporting it to you. Every year, about 4 times as many people die because of knives. Do we restrict people from being able to buy knives? About 1.5 to 2 times as many people die because of blunt objects. That's baseball bats, that's hammers, sticks. Should we make it illegal for American citizens to have a baseball bat or a hammer or a stick, even though that's used 2 times as many times as rifles are to be able to kill American citizens? Because crazed criminals will use these weapons, does that mean we should take them away? Would you be okay with that? Okay, what about cars? Cars should be removed, right? Because crazed individuals across the nation, they use these kind of weapons. You don't believe me? Let's go back in time. This is 2016, August 2016. France, the city of Nice. And what we know was that 303 people were injured. Over 85 people were killed because a crazed man rented a truck and drove through crowds of people. 303 people injured, 85 killed because he was driving a truck through people. Did we ban people from being able to rent trucks? Did we decide that trucks are no longer something that civilians could own? What about in Las Vegas? Because you may say, well, Mike, that wasn't in America. We're talking about American crime. Okay, so back in 2016, Lakeisha Holloway, who is facing 71 charges and 1,000 years in jail. Why? Because she ran over a crowd of people with her car in Las Vegas. She even ran over an 11-year-old child, which is why she's facing 1,000 years in prison. Should we ban her car from all civilians? You say, well, Mike, that's 2016. That's just one case. Okay, how about looking at 2017? There's a terror attack. 8 people killed, 11 people injured in Manhattan, New York State. This is reported by the New York Times. Okay, New York Times is talking about it. We know that this insane, crazed criminal took his truck and ran around, and he was running people over. 8 people were killed. 11 people were injured. He smashed into a school bus, jumped out, and was running around screaming, Allahu Akbar, with a pellet gun and a paintball gun. Yes, he's an Islamic extremist, given. But it doesn't matter. Whether it's racism or whether it's religious extremism or whether it's just a criminal being a criminal, it doesn't really matter. In every single one of these cases, which we denounce equally, regardless of the color of skin, regardless of the sexual preference, regardless of the political preference, in every single one of the cases, we denounce them because they are vile, crazed, deranged criminals. And we hope to see them get the fullest extent of the law, punished to the fullest extent of the law. And we are not above saying that the death penalty seems warranted to us. But over and over again, we have seen that. And you say, well, Mike, that was 2017. It's What about November of 2021? November of 2021, a crazed man in Waukesha, Wisconsin, he had a truck, he had his car, and he decided that because he believed in BLM, because he believed in political ideology that like critical race theory and intersectionality, because he believed in black supremacy, he decided that since there was a parade, and it was a parade with a lot of white people celebrating Christmas, he decided that he was going to target them and run them over. And he did. Remember that? Should we ban all the cars? Now, I'm giving you great examples here. So we've talked about baseball bats. We talked about knives. We're talking about cars. The fact that criminals use all of these and more to be able to harm and kill individuals, does that mean civilians now no longer get the right to have that? Does that make any sense? That you should be denied the ability to protect yourself and the rest of the public? And let's be very clear here. This is not only self-defense, it is passive self-defense. Depending on what I am wearing and the type of weather, you wouldn't even know if I have this on. And it's to protect me. Now, whether or not a crazed individual does the same thing, well, they use cars as weapons. They use baseball bats as weapons. They use cooking knives as weapons. And yes, they use firearms as weapons. But that has nothing to do with legal, law-abiding citizens, which are 99.994% of the population of the world. So why should we be punished for that? So the argument that's being made by Rolling Stone that this criminal was afraid of police, he was afraid of armed security, and he was afraid of American citizens exercising their Second Amendment rights so that he could commit his crime. His fears meant that he was going to use the same protection citizens use to protect themselves against actions he was going to make. That doesn't mean that we should suddenly lose the right to have this. We made that same statement. We made that same argument. We made the same argument in January of 2021. And in that argument, we said at the time, as we will show you, does anyone understand this? That you are not allowed to own something that will protect you, that has zero offensive capabilities. There has been no one in the history of the United States that has been killed because of a bulletproof vest, because of body armor. It is a defensive protection. What is wrong with this state? What is seriously wrong with the people who are in this state? And we ask that question again. I will ask that question again. What is wrong with these people? That they're looking at this bill, which we do invite you. See our video from January. See when we went and read through the entire bill. And we have the link to the bill so that you can see it for yourself, so that you can make the determination for yourself on A352, which is now being promoted and now trying to be pushed through New York State's government because it's to protect you. Well, let me give you one final logic about this. We've established just because criminals use the same thing that law-abiding citizens use does not mean that it should be removed from your ability to own it. Doesn't mean that you get denied to have a product or an item or a service because a criminal abused that right. That's just not the way the law works. And we established, as you can see visually, as well as just in documentation, there is no offensive capabilities of body armor. And there are many reasons why American citizens find that to be important, to be able to own this. Fair enough. But let's address the logic. Why are politicians saying you don't have that right, that you should not be able to protect yourself? Well, the first answer is, well, and we hear this from progressives, well, government will protect you. Government's going to protect me? Let's really think about that. Government cannot be at every street corner. They cannot be in every business. They cannot be everywhere that you are. That's not possible. So government, whether it's federal, state, or local, cannot protect you at all times, always, at the moment that you need them the very most. So that's not an answer. Why else are politicians saying this? Well, if you don't have the ability to protect yourself, you must rely on the government to protect you. Government becomes bigger and more powerful. You become more subservient. That is just the function of not being able to have something to protect yourself, like the self-defense of body armor, as well as having the ability to be a good guy with a gun, to have a concealed carry permit, to be able to be armed like the Second Amendment allows us to be, which is a choice. Again, if you don't want to carry a gun, if you think guns are evil, that's fantastic. Don't own one. You have that right. I also have the right to think that you're wrong and to own a firearm and to protect myself and my home and my property. There's nothing wrong with that either. And it can be invaluable. It saves lives. We've seen that over and over again. We've gone over it in this program many times. And that's what the gunman, this crazed criminal in Buffalo, realized. That, yes, American citizens who are armed can protect themselves and might stop him. That's the thing to keep in mind. The Second Amendment, he admits, he realizes in his planning, his months of planning, that's going to protect him. Now, there's the third thing. Do you think that a criminal, someone who is planning out a master plan of terrorism and racism to go in and kill a bunch of people, do you think that just because it was illegal that he wouldn't have tried to get body armor anyway? Do you think that someone who is breaking multiple laws in New York State consciously with a detailed plan, that this individual wouldn't have found some other way to either protect themselves or to otherwise try and circumvent the guards and police and any citizens that may be armed? This was someone who was seriously deranged, but seriously planning, like many of these mass shootings we see over and over again, where they build bombs, like the attack against Islamabad, like San Bernardino, like Columbine. These criminals think these things out, and it's sad. And they pick targets specifically so that they can have the greatest assurance that they're hitting a soft target, that no one will be armed, that it will be hard for the police to get to them. They go to gun-free zones. 90% of all of these mass shootings happen gun-free zones because you're not able to defend yourself. The number of people who could possibly defend themselves is limited. So again, the problem is we're hearing politicians who have promised us over and over and over again that they have the solution. And the solution is to give them more power. We saw that in 2013 with the New York SAFE Act. We've seen that in 2018 with the red flag laws. We see that in 2022 with the ghost gun bans. We've seen that with magazine bans and bans on the different types of firearms that are allowed. And now we're seeing them try to say that when it comes to self-defense, a passive self-defense, you don't have these rights because they will protect you, and yet they can't. I truly believe that the reason why Democrats who control the New York State government, they're not going to save anyone's life by saying you can't have something that will save your life. And telling you you can't have a bulletproof vest, which might save your life, they're increasing your danger. Well, that means they have to take away your guns too, to try and balance that out, to try and make you more safe. So since you can't protect yourself, you can't own a firearm either. This is part of a process to be able to take away the Second Amendment rights. This is part of a process to make you more of a servant, a serf, to make you obedient to some member of government. It's a terrifying thought, but that is the logical conclusion of their action. You can't protect yourself. You must rely on the government. You must rely on law enforcement, and therefore you must obey because they're the only ones with power. And we've seen that exact example play out over and over again in every single socialist nation on the face of the earth throughout the history of the face of the earth. We've seen this in every dictatorship. We've seen this in every autocracy across the face of the earth. They take away people's ability to defend themselves and to be able to fight back. They take away their firearms. And after that, people die en masse. That happened in Russia, happened in China, North Korea, Venezuela, Cuba. Named a socialist nation, it's happened every single time. And we have no reason to believe that the future is going to be any different. The premise of the idea of Bill A352 was a bad idea in 2019. It was a dumb idea in 2021. It remains a dumb, bad idea in 2022, especially as we see crime and violence increasing, especially as we are seeing politicians, progressive politicians, putting out policies that are allowing criminals to become more violent and to commit greater violence against the average citizen. At the same time that we have schools like SUNY Broome in SUNY Broome College, where they are teaching kids and indoctrinating them into critical race theory, this ideology that divides America and increases the net racism in America. I think we've been very clear. I think we've been detailed. I think we've made logical arguments on why you should not fall into the fear, the emotion that's coming from CBS, that's coming from Rolling Stone, and various politicians, Democrats across the state that are saying, oh, no, I understand you're afraid, and you should be afraid, but you can't defend yourself. You have to obey the government. The government will take care of it. Don't fall into that trap of fear. Don't just settle for telling politicians, do something so that they do bad things, things that do not help you, but do empower them. Now, you may think, Mike, that's great, but I don't agree with you. Fine. Tell us why. Tell us what evidence you have that refutes what we've discussed. What evidence that we have presented both in 2021 and again today in 2022 that makes the argument make sense. And most of all, we ask every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, please come join us where we will speak about this and other issues around the world to people everywhere in the globe to hear what you have to say. We look forward to hearing your voice, and we thank you for spending time with us today. Thank you.